Sarah.
Hello, Geetika. Nice to see you.
Same here. Thank you so much for your time. I'm so excited about our topic. But I was thinking that before we dive into midlife queries and answers, it would be interesting for our listeners and for you and me as well to go back in time and recall what did midlife look like for women around us
Hmm.
in larger part of the society, and then fast forward 2024, how has midlife canvas changed in the last 3 or 4 decades? Do you want to start first or you want me to start first?
Oh, you go ahead. You go ahead.
So I am from India, and my first 26 years were spent in India. So my recollection, and those for people who are trying to calculate the age, please do not. The topic that we're discussing is pretty much the answer. So I think, as much as I remember, people around me, my mom, and women around in our family circle. So midlife was 40 to 60, and I'm going to mention that in Hinduism, there's a third stage called Vanprastha. So Vanprastha actually literally means forest road. So, which means that it's typically marked with the birth of grandkids, you handing over your responsibilities to the next generation, spiritual pursuit, and basically you're done with all your household chores. So you're taking a break and thinking about what next in a way that you are either spending a lot of time with your grandkids and just going from one um, uh, meeting families. So, but when you fast forward, midlife canvas has changed a lot because I think women at that time, when they were looking around, they could see everybody almost in the same stage. They could connect with each other in many ways because that's what they were all experiencing. But I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, that right now midlife has different meaning for everybody. Like
Hmm.
the people who are not done with the household responsibilities, the people who have kids in colleges, their kids may have gotten married, but people are also getting married late, having kids
Yes.
later in life,
Yes.
and those who have taken a break, like myself, from career for some time, they're looking for work. They're
Yeah.
going back to their career.
Right.
So I know that your website mentions financial post. I think they had an article and you were interviewed. It's like 50-year-old intern.
Hmm.
And it's so true because when you look around, we all are experiencing different midlife.
Yes. Yes. And I think that exactly for the reasons you're saying, in terms of getting married later, having kids later, if that's the path that you choose, you might not relate at all to the idea of midlife until you're a little older. So I think even though they still do say 40 to 60, it's pushed a little bit more 45 to 65.
Yep.
Because I think a 40-year-old can still be in a not midlife, I'm putting quotes around it, stage of life. And also I feel like we're just doing everything maybe 10 years later than our parents did, or, so it's,
Totally.
yeah. And also, I mean, there's many people who aren't married, don't have kids, and they also go through midlife. And so I also think that's a bit later. So it's not necessarily related to children,
Yeah.
but it's just this idea. I think it's an idea of, am I doing what I want to be doing? It's like when you get to some kind of inflection point where you say, uh, time feels like it's running out in some kind of a way. And also it feels like there's a lot of time potentially still ahead. So how do I want to be
Exactly.
spending it? I think
Yeah.
that's kind of yeah.
How was it when you were growing up as a little girl? Like when you looked around, how did it look like
Yeah.
to you
I don't
or
think I
women
was
around you?
aware of it at all. Like, I don't think I thought about it very much. I was a very self-involved teenager. Very self-involved. But I did have some interesting role modeling in my family. So my mother, who stayed at home with us when we were young, she did lots of things. She went into body work called Traeger therapy. When I was young, she did dance therapy courses at York University here in Toronto. And, but she went back to school and trained to be a therapist when I was in high school. And so I think it took her about 7 years. I think she would say that's right. And then her first client was when she was 46. So she definitely had that feeling. And I know because I do some interviews on my website, or I had been doing interviews with midlife women because I wanted to show all the different ways
Mm.
that we can be at midlife and the different kind of changes that can happen. And so I interviewed her. And she had said that on paper, she had everything she had ever wanted. And yet she had this sort of feeling of not being quite happy or satisfied. And I think that's what caused her to go and get therapy herself in her 40s, and then led her to this career change. So I had this beautiful modeling of somebody really taking care of their own mental health, spiritual health in midlife without paying much attention to it. Like it was just kind of running in the background if that's what she was doing.
Yeah.
And I think those have a big impact, like those kind of models, having them close, like then you think, well, that's been shown to me as a road that I could get into my 40s and do something different.
Yeah.
I also, my grandmother is an artist, and oh, my light is flashing. I don't know if you can see that. It's like strobe lighting. My grandmother is an artist. All my life I've known her as an artist, but she didn't start that until she was in midlife. And it became such a huge part of her identity in the second half of her life. She's still living. She's still with us. She's 98 years old. So, and that's something she sold paintings, but she just did it also just out of passion. And it was really also beautiful to see that somebody she
Yeah.
also went back to school to do that. So yeah, I've had those
It's
two and other.
interesting. It's interesting that you brought your mom and your grandma. I actually, I'm sure my mom will listen to this particular episode for sure. So I need to tell that she started. Like I also feel like maybe as women we have so many other commitments happening,
Yeah.
and I don't know about other cultures, but definitely for in my culture or in my growing up years, the message was very clear that certain time of this life you have to do certain things. But having said that, my mom she did her PhD at later stage in her 40s, and then she wrote a book in her late, I think, 50s. In fact, she
Wow.
uprooted me and my sister and herself from India and brought all three of us here in her late mid 50s. So yeah,
Wow.
so I feel like maybe because of the prior commitments and struggles that she had to go through. So I wonder how many people actually realize that, you know what, we did what we needed to do, but
Yeah.
now it's me time. It's my time. I need to find myself. Maybe I lost myself somewhere along the way. And
Yes.
I know that your landing page says there is a lifetime between 40 and finished.
Yes.
Love that.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I feel like um, so many people start to get that feeling of dread as they're coming up to their 40th birthday or their 50th birthday. And they have this feeling like I haven't done everything that I wanted to do, as if 40 was the finish line, as if there's not potentially another 40, 50, 60 years ahead of you. I mean, people are living a long time. And I just heard someone else say, when you get to 40, you have your whole life to do again, another 40 years potentially, but this time you don't have to learn to walk and talk. And so you can just be an adult for all that time. So
Mhm.
there is a lot of possibility in those years. And it's such a shame to me that we dread it. And feel bad sometimes about what we haven't yet achieved. I think that's a real sad thing.
I think there's a reason, and it's kind of just human nature, right? You've gone through your like 45, 48 years, and then you're thinking, oh my God, I'm going to hit 50. What have I done? Like, I really need to think hard about it. And I kind of feel like, yeah, it looks more like a crisis than an awakening, like especially for women, menopause hitting you, your kids
Right.
leaving, and then it's like, no, it's kind of an empty nest that we call. Although
Right.
I'm not experiencing that for quite some time now because mine are just in elementary school. But
Hmm.
it is so different when you look around and you feel like, how come I am where I am? Did I do something wrong? Did I miss something?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know. I guess it's human nature. We'll never know, but I feel like this might be a nurture nature thing that we are surrounded by messages that we have to achieve certain things. We are in a very doing society versus a being one. And there's a lot of pressure to achieve. So I wonder if we grew up in a place where it was like you have a whole life to grow and learn and evolve, if we would still have those feelings in the middle. And I hear you about the crisis. You know, my feelings are that you can have a crisis at any age,
Yeah.
and there are real crises that are really difficult to get through. But aging itself is not the crisis. Midlife itself is not the crisis. And those questions that you're saying, like that feeling that you want to question, okay, who am I? What do I want to do next? Am I making the most of my time? That's the awakening, not the crisis, because it's such an opportunity for
Mhm.
something else, like what your mom did, right? Like it's if
Yeah.
she didn't go through those questions, which I'm assuming she did it in some way, she wouldn't have
Hmm.
done those things. And so it can feel like a crisis. I understand that it feels like a crisis, but I think when you get to the other side of it, you realize it was a really positive turning point, because it's when you stopped going kind of autopilot, check, 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 check. I'm checking all the boxes of my life that I'm supposed to.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
now I'm starting to question what I really want. So
It's
that's
interesting
my,
that I want to kind of clarify here that
yeah.
I'm sure like some of my friends who will relate to me because they're also in the same stage, kids in elementary school, but like we are kind of approaching our 50s. And it seems like, you know what, if I paused something for a priceless thing, I'm very happy about it. And at least there's some people who are in my kind of experiencing midlife like I would in a couple of years. But again, I wonder if the pandemic had any
Hmm.
role in kind of
Hmm.
accentuating these kind of feelings. Like, okay, it gave us a pause there where it was
Hmm.
not just one person having that pause or like 10 people around you. The whole world seemed to be like, okay, I don't know. Can I plan next week?
Yes,
How do you think the
exactly.
pandemic played a role in all these feelings?
Well, exactly what you're saying. I think the pandemic mimicked that sort of existential feeling that we get
Mm.
as we get older, when we start to feel like, oh, is time running out? Am I spending it wisely? Um, like, are the things I'm doing what I really want to be doing? Am I the person I want to be? That's like a feeling when you realize your mortality, right? Like you realize that you have limited time on this planet. I think when we're younger, we know it, but we don't really know it. And so we just live. But then you get to a certain age and you get more aware of that. And so what I feel is that the pandemic gave every human that feeling, because we didn't know at the beginning how it was going to go. It felt really scary. And I think a lot of people were like, okay, if this is it, do I have the life I want? And the other part, as you said, is the pause. Like part of, I think, what happens in midlife is that we get that natural pause. Like there's just like a window opens up where we go, okay, hold on. I just want to breathe here and just take stock. And so the pandemic offered that to everyone as well, or most people, not everyone. Lots of people were busier than ever during the pandemic, but a lot of people got to get to pause, right? And then they can ask these questions that a lot of people are asking in midlife.
Sarah, you're a midlife coach and help people grow professionally and personally. So, for our
Hmm.
listeners, can you tell what do people come up when they are talking to you about their midlife crisis or awakening? Like, can you tell us some examples so people who are listening, they're not feeling like, okay, maybe it's just me feeling like that. Oh no, there's an example there. And how did you deal with that?
Yeah, I can promise you it's not just you. And I think people don't tend to come and say, I'm having a midlife crisis, but they'll come and say some version of, I just want to know what's next for me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They're not happy
Yeah.
in their work, or they're feeling stuck in their family dynamic, or they're feeling like they're outgrowing some aspect of their life, or they're feeling like there's just something more for them and they don't know what it is.
Hmm.
And so it's usually some version of that, like, please just help me figure out what's next. And when I get groups of women together, the recognition, the familiarity and the experience, even if the lives are different, the lived experiences are different, it's so striking. So I just want people to know, no, you're not alone at all. And you'd be surprised how many people share your feelings. It's wobbly. It's a wobbly feeling because it feels, I actually just did a workshop yesterday, and the image that came to me as someone was talking is like being on a boat and you have to keep shifting your weight from foot to foot so that you're balanced. And it
Mm-hmm.
feels like that when you don't know, when you're in this sort of more liminal in between space, right? So, but it's a lot of rich growth happens in that space. And I think we tend to want to get to the next thing really quickly. And if you can be, I'm sorry, my throat needs a little, if you can allow yourself to stay in the not knowing, there's a lot of rich stuff there. So it
I
feels uncomfortable, but it's potent.
I wonder if men go through that midlife crisis or awakening. Do they talk about it as well? Like,
They do. I would say that it's a specific kind of man that comes to me. So I can't speak for the whole gender, but I actually have more of a specific kind of person that comes to me overall. I tend to attract kind of a deep feeling, sensitive type person, someone who is in touch with their inner life and likes to make connections and is creative that way. So it's those men, I feel like the questions aren't that different, but there's certainly things that impact women differently.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, just,
Um,
yeah,
Sarah, I'm sure lots of people would want to talk to you after they listen to our interview. So, if you can tell me top five things that come to your mind when
yeah.
people are in their midlife and questioning and kind of a little hesitant to approach somebody and ask, and they feel like, okay, maybe I'm going to be judged for feeling like that. Maybe I
Hmm.
can figure it out on my own. What are
Yeah.
the five top things that you would advise them to do?
Yeah. Well, I just want to address that feeling of judgment. Like, I think if I put myself back into my 40s, because I feel like I've had a couple of these awakenings I'm 52 now. But if I put myself back into my 40s, I wouldn't have even known how to talk about how I was feeling enough to even worry about judgment. Like, I didn't have language for it.
Mhm.
So, the fact that people are even know that there's something happening and are aware of it is like great. Like, it's a good step.
So acknowledgement, first of all, to
The
yourself.
acknowledgement and that you have the awareness of it. Like, I remember just feeling kind of stuck, feeling like other people were moving forward and I wasn't, and I didn't know why. And I was kind of caught in some, um, not very good habits in terms of like being a rescuer or a fixer and like giving my energy out to people that, um, really it wasn't helping anybody for me to do that. And instead, when I woke up, I was able to start putting the energy into myself and making choices for me. And so I just want to say to anybody who's feeling that way, you're not alone. And yes, this is a common thing that happens in midlife. So don't be afraid to reach out for some kind of support from someone, whether it's a friend or a mentor or a coach or a therapist or something. So that's actually one of my five. Don't be afraid to reach out. But if you don't want to do that and you want to just do some self reflection without working with anybody on it, One thing I would get people to start thinking about is what your values are. So not in a morals kind of a way, but in like a what's important to you at this stage of your life. And can you narrow it down to a couple of things that can help guide your actions? So like, for example, also in my 40s, I realized connection was really important to me. But when I looked at how I was spending my time, I was working from home and I was like not talking to friends during the day. I was just working and then be with. So I had to purposely build in time for this value of mine of connection. So that could be,
Totally
right?
agree with you. I do not like checking each other on Facebook. I do not get that concept at all. Why can't people pick
Right.
up the phone? I really love my
Yeah.
landline.
Right.
Phone, dial the number and talk to that
Yeah.
person. I do
Yeah.
that, but I feel like when somebody like me who does that, it's like, are you crazy? Like, just text me. It's like, but I guess this is how the world is right now.
Yeah, it's a false sense of connection.
Mm-hmm.
Social media is a false sense of connection because you're like, oh, I know what she's up to. I don't need to
Mm-hmm.
check in with her.
Yeah.
But you don't because people don't put their whole lives on social media. And so, but it is the rare person that you can just dial up these days. Like there are a handful of people in my life I can just call. Everybody else, you kind of have to like book an appointment with them to chat, right? So it's different. But so yeah, so focus, just take some time. And the way to do that is to think about a moment in time when you were really, really content
Yeah.
and satisfied, and what was present. Who were you with? Where were you? What were you doing? And see if you can just find the thread. And then the other way is to find out what makes you really angry, because probably a value is being stepped on. So if you are outraged by something, there's a value in there that is probably getting stepped on. So it's just a backwards way of getting into the value.
Yeah.
And once you know it, then you can start to say, okay, well, how can I have more of this thing?
Mhm.
How can I honor this? So that's a really good step in the right direction. The other thing I would say is to create some kind of a vision for yourself. So I'm not a huge planner. I'm not saying necessarily goals, but like, what do you want life to feel like in a year? What do you want to be doing? What would you love to be true in a year? And just take some time to flesh that out in whatever way feels good to you. It might be making some kind of collage or writing about it or painting something or putting together a playlist that like represents how you would feel, but get some kind of a vision that you can hold in your mind. Um, and then the last two, I think sometimes what happens at this stage is that we think we are done. We think we're baked. So I would encourage people to explore opportunities for growth and learning. Try new things, experiment, just call it a year of exploration. Go on micro adventures, like take little courses, do workshops, like whatever it is, read books, like just open your mind to learning new things, because the idea that we learn in the first half of life and then stop is not true.
It's not true. You're right.
Not true. And then the last thing is to apply what you've learned. So if you go out and try something and it really wasn't for you, just do some reflection. Like, what did I learn about myself from that? Or if you really loved it and you felt lit up by it,
Yeah.
what was it about that thing? And I think if you do those 5 things, you'll start feeling a lot differently about midlife in not that long a time. Like it will start to feel more like an awakening than a crisis.
Those were very
Um,
important key points, Sarah. Thank you so much for your
yeah.
time.
Oh, you're
And I hope
welcome.
our listeners benefit from it and they will connect with you if they have any more questions. So your
Great.
website, which I'm going to write in my write up about our interview today, is sarasmeaton, SMEATON.com.
Yes, and Sarah without an H.
SARA. Thank
Yes, SARA. Yes,
Thank
exactly.
you so much,
Yes.
Sarah. Love talking with you.
I love talking with you too. Thank you so much for having me.